These are the times that try men's souls. With these words, Thomas Paine described the state of the American cause barely 5 months after the Declaration of Independence had been signed and published. George Washington's colonials had been defeated in a series of battles across New York, and the British occupied most of the colony of New Jersey, effectively isolating New England from the rest of the colonies. With his army now numbering less than 5,000 men, many of whose enlistments were soon due to expire, Washington retreated across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. This strategic retreat was the beginning of what has come to be known as the 10 Crucial Days, 10 days of improbable success in 3 battles. The Battle of Princeton on December 26, 1776, in which the Continental Army surprised and defeated a garrison of 1,500 Hessian mercenaries. The Battle of Assunpink Creek on January 2, 1777, in which the colonials fought in a successful delaying action against 1,500 British regulars under the command of General Charles Cornwallis. The same General Cornwallis who would later surrender at Yorktown, giving the colonies independence. And finally, the Battle of Princeton on the morning of January 3, 1777, in which Washington rallied his bedraggled soldiers to hand the British a stinging defeat and send the Redcoats retreating north to safety. Unplanned and a surprise to both British and colonial soldiers alike, the battle unfolded over a mere 2 hours. However, at its end, it established General George Washington as a true military leader. It revived the nearly shattered morale of the soldiers of the Continental Army, and it gave the colonies renewed hope for independence. The stories of those who were there and who participated in the fateful events in and around Princeton that January are tales of wonder, surprise, dedication, heroism, determination, tragedy, and loss. Stories like that of Colonel Edward Hand of the 1st Pennsylvania Rifle Regiment, who suddenly found himself in command at a critical moment.
Expecting General Cornwallis to send an overwhelming number of troops down from Princeton to Trenton, General Washington sent my brigade of Pennsylvania and Maryland riflemen, along with several Virginia regiments and a 2-cannon Pennsylvania artillery company, up the primary road to Princeton to set up delaying ambushes at several locations along the road where it crossed a creek. After the British column passed through the village of Maidenhead and approached our troops awaiting for them at 5 Mile Run, my commander, the General Roche de Fourmoy, inexplicably mounted his horse and galloped off towards Trenton without saying a word to any of us. This left me, only a colonel, in command. I took charge and placed Captain Henry Miller of my riflemen in command of my advanced guard of skirmishers. The troops I now commanded would have to harass the British all the way to Trenton. We needed to delay Cornwallis all day if possible. Around 1 in the afternoon, I posted my men in mile-deep woods on the right side of the road near the Shabakunk Creek. I posted myself on the right and Miller on the left, and we quietly awaited the British. When the advanced British Guard came within point-blank range, we fired an unexpected deadly volley that broke the British ranks and forced them to retreat back to their main force in some confusion. When preparing for full battle, Cornwallis formed his column into a line of battle on the soft, muddy earth and also ordered up artillery that fired into the woods for about 30 minutes before he advanced his troops. Using tactics like these, I successfully delayed the British advance until very late in the afternoon. My men joined Washington's forces defending Mill Hill at Assunpink Creek. Although the British made several attempts to cross the Creek Stone Bridge and both armies exchanged artillery fire, Cornwallis called off the action for the day due to darkness, expecting to finish off the battle the next morning. However, after meeting with his officers, Washington ordered that all regiments keep their campfires burning and to form up to march to Princeton overnight, using a route that would go around the British and prevent them of knowing of our departure. My name is Colonel Edward Hand, and I was an eyewitness to history.
Major John Kelly of the Northumberland County Militia from Pennsylvania lived through those same events on that same day, but his path to victory included an impromptu bath.
During the Battle of Princeton, I was with Mifflin's Brigade on the Quaker Road along the Stony Brook. Our main objective was to destroy the bridge over the creek at Worth's Mill. Some men in Mifflin's Brigade were ordered into the battle on the Clark Farms, while we stayed on the road. After the action on the adjacent farm fields ended with the British retreat, I was ordered by Colonel Potter to dismantle the bridge. This would hinder a British advance up the road when Lord Cornwallis brought his army back from Trenton once he realized we had deceived him overnight. Tearing down the bridge was not going to be an easy job, so I worked alongside my men so that no one would think I was a coward. As we worked, the British did begin to approach from Maidenhead and began firing at us with two 6-pounder field pieces. Captain Forrest's artillery company of 2 guns fired back to protect us. During the exchange of fire, I was hurriedly cutting away at the main beam. Suddenly, the beam gave way and fell into the icy cold Stony Brook, taking me with it. I was hardly dead, but in great danger. I managed to get through the high water and floating timbers to get to the bank of the creek. I struggled out, and although weighed down by my wet, frozen clothes, I followed after my retreating men. Before I reached them, I ran into an armed British soldier, took him prisoner, and brought him with me to the American camp. Because of our efforts, the British regulars would have to ford the Stony Brook and drag their artillery through it as well. This really slowed them down and made the regulars as uncomfortable as I was, but it allowed our army to safely move on from Princeton. My name is Major John Kelly, and I was an eyewitness to history.
Another soldier from Pennsylvania, John Hood of the 3rd Battalion of Philadelphia Associators, recounts the experiences and importance of the associations at Princeton.
At the Battle of Princeton, I was a private soldier in the 3rd Battalion of Philadelphia Associators. We were volunteer militiamen because Pennsylvania did not have a government-run militia system. The men joined companies known as associations, and we, the men, as associators. After Washington's victory at Trenton, we were motivated to join with them to do more damage to the British regulars. After a long night march from Trenton, the night of January 2nd, 1777, we arrived south of Princeton near the Stony Brook at a spot on the Quaker Road about 7:30 a.m. General Washington split his army into 3 main groups and gave the officers directions on how we would attack the town of Princeton. My company was in a brigade commanded by Colonel Hossiger. Hossiger's brigade was ordered to continue along the Quaker Road, cross the Post Road, known to the British as the King's Highway, and take a back route across farms to the northwest side of Princeton. We would then be in a position to assist other parts of the army taking the eastern and southern approaches to the town. We set off first because we had the longest distance to take to get into position. We did not know that most of the British forces were marching south on the Post Road, while we were headed in the opposite direction towards Princeton, just out of sight due to the rolling terrain. We reached the outskirts of Princeton about daylight, came through some woods and a field at the back of town where we saw some defensive earthworks that British soldiers had begun constructing just days before. From an orchard-covered hill behind the house of a Dr. Bainbridge, we could see the British column ascending Cochrane's Hill just across the Stony Brook. I saw this column suddenly reverse its direction and shortly after made out the beginning of a battle on farms south of us. It became apparent that Washington's plan to attack the town had to be canceled and the primary action would take place south of town. We did not participate in the actual battle, but we did assist in taking prisoner of retreating British soldiers. My name is John Hood, and I was an eyewitness to history.
The recollections of Joseph Clark, a Princeton native and a student at the College of New Jersey, later to be known as Princeton University, provide a local and sobering perspective on the battle and its aftermath.
I was a 23-year-old student at the College of New Jersey in Princeton in 1776. At the end of November, it looked like both the American and British armies were going to come through Princeton. Dr. John Witherspoon, president of our college, closed down the school on November 30th so that we could all seek safety. I could not go home to Elizabethtown because the British were already there, so I went to the home of a local farmer I'd gotten to know. I was able to join up with a makeshift militia company made up of men from Princeton and the neighboring towns. When I first joined them, I didn't even have a musket, but I was able to find one I could borrow to use. We spent the month of December going back and forth across the Delaware River to Washington's encampment there. On the New Jersey side of the river, we worked in small bands to watch British movements and try to protect farms from British plundering. On the morning of January 3rd, we set out from Pennytown for Trenton, expecting to join the battle when the fighting renewed. Half an hour after sunrise, gunfire began towards Princeton. We immediately marched back to Pennytown and waited some time for intelligence. We looked for British patrols but made no encounters. After getting food and rest for about 3 hours at a local farmhouse, about 3 p.m. we headed for Princeton and came upon the battlefield. It had a most dismal prospect with many pale and mangled corpses lying in the mud and blood. Over the next couple of days, we helped take care of captured British baggage and cared for the wounded. I was appointed to care for a lieutenant injured late in the battle. I cared for him until Friday night, January the 10th, when he died. I spent the rest of the month helping with British supplies and prisoners, and then attacking a British foraging party looking for food for their troops at New Brunswick. My name is Joseph Clark, and I was an eyewitness to history.
One of the most storied units in the early stages of the American Revolution was Hazlitt's Delaware Militia. Its founder and commander, Colonel John Hazlitt, fought brilliantly on that Princeton battlefield and made the ultimate sacrifice.
At about 7:30 on the morning of January 3rd, 1777, I was with General Washington's army, south of Princeton. We had been marching all night long from Trenton. His Excellency had given orders for the attack on Princeton. I and the few remaining troops of my regiment were assigned to General Hugh Mercer's brigade. We were to follow the main army along a little-used road called the Sawmill Road. A little after 8 o'clock, we passed the house of Quaker farmer Thomas Clark and learned that a group of British light cavalry had been seen on a hilltop about a mile away on the main road to Trenton. Believing this was a morning patrol from the village, Mercer was ordered to take some troops and cross the farm fields to cut off the patrol before it could alert the British troops in Princeton to our approach. As we proceeded to cross the fields, I was concerned that Mercer did not send scouts ahead. However, I marched on foot at the side of Mercer on his horse. Marching was not easy for me that day. For on the night after the battle against the Hessians in Trenton, as we were crossing the Delaware River to Pennsylvania, I had fallen into the icy waters of the Delaware River. This had caused my legs to swell, and I was in great discomfort. But nothing was going to deter me from leading my brave fellows into battle. What we did not know was that the patrol was actually more than 2 regiments of British, and that they had also seen us. Their commander turned his column around to intercept us before we got to Princeton, and he sent a regiment plus some dragoons to cross the same fields that we were crossing. As we advanced, we approached an apple orchard near a farmhouse and a barn, and then we were surprised to see a British force coming over a rise in the ground. We exchanged a volley of fire with the British, and they followed up with a bayonet charge that threatened to overpower our men, most of whom did not have bayonets. In the action, General Mercer's horse was wounded, and the general fell to the ground. He got up and tried to rally his men, but was surrounded and repeatedly bayoneted. Our brigade was now in retreat, and I attempted to rally our men and hopefully be able to go to Mercer's assistance. However, a British musket ball hit me in the head and ended my life.
Doctor, soldier, commander, perhaps Washington's closest confidant and trusted officer. Scotsman and Brigadier General Hugh Mercer remains the historic standard-bearer for Revolutionary Princeton and for the battle which unfolded there on that cold morning of January 3rd, 1777.
After marching all night from Trenton by way of back roads in order so that our movements would not be observed by the British forces that were massing to attack us in Trenton in the morning, General Washington decided to split his forces. My group and I were detailed along with the main force to go along an old and little used road heading towards Princeton by way of the rear of the town. General Washington was in command of the main force, and my brigade and I were part of Major General Nathaniel Greene's division. When Washington became aware that British soldiers had been spotted about a mile away on a hilltop on the road to Trenton, he believed it was probably just a British morning patrol sent out from Princeton, and he ordered me to take my men, cut them off while the main force continued to Princeton. I led my men through an orchard and a farm towards the house and barn of the farmer. Unknown to us at the time, the British had massed a large force and the commander had spotted us. The British commander sent troops to intercept us, and we met them unexpectedly on the farm. In the heavy fighting that developed, my men fought bravely but became terrified when the British troops charged them with bayonets. Most of my men did not have bayonets and they began to retreat. I tried to rally them but fell from my horse when he was severely wounded in the leg and fell. I continued to fight on foot and refused to surrender to the British soldiers. As a consequence, I was severely wounded. I was bayoneted 7 times, and a British soldier took his musket and clubbed me about my head. It appeared to soldiers of both armies that I was dead, but I still breathed. A passing soldier carried me to the farmhouse that we had just had this swirling fight around when we were sent out to intercept the British patrol. The farmer, his sister, and his slave girl, Susanna, cared for me, along with doctors from both armies. Everyone thought that I would survive my wounds. Being a physician myself, I knew they were mortal. 9 days later, I died in that same farmhouse.
Of the more than 200 engagements fought during our War of Independence, more of them by far took place in New York and New Jersey than in any other of the 13 colonies. These battles created enduring myths and made legendary heroes of figures like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Patrick Henry, and Betsy Ross. It serves us well, however, to remember that these battles were fought in greatest measure by ordinary people who were called upon to do extraordinary things at pivotal moments in our past. It was they who purchased our lives and our liberties with their courage, their endurance, and in many cases, their blood, and who, in the doing, became eyewitnesses to history.